It was supposed to be just another quiet shift. The night air was cold, that kind of silence that makes the city feel suspended between life and sleep. When the call came in, paramedic Evan Cole barely looked up from his coffee. Unresponsive male, mid-40s, found near an alley downtown, no ID. No name, just coordinates and the sound of rain hitting asphalt on the other end of the radio. By the time the ambulance reached the scene, the street was almost empty. A few flickering lights from a convenience store, the echo of a distant siren, and him, a man lying motionless on the wet concrete. His clothes were torn, his skin pale under the harsh glow of the street lamp. He wasn't drunk, he wasn't bleeding, but something about him was wrong, deeply wrong. Evan knelt beside him, checking for a pulse. It was faint, erratic. When he tried to speak, the man's lips moved, but no sound came out, only a soft tremor, like someone trying to remember how to exist. They rushed him inside the ambulance. No wallet, no phone, no identification. Only a single hospital bracelet on his wrist faded, the ink almost gone. It read, D. Holt. The drive was quiet except for the heartbeat monitor beeping like a question that no one could answer. When they reached the hospital, Nurse Amara Lewis was waiting at the emergency bay. She looked at the man for less than a second and froze. Not because she recognized him, but because there was something in his eyes, half open, cloudy, that felt unfinished. Get him to trauma too, she said, voice steady but low. As they wheeled the stretcher down the corridor, Evan whispered to her, I don't think he wants to live. Amara didn't reply. She just looked at the man again, at his chest rising unevenly, his hand twitching with the last of his strength, and for a moment, she couldn't tell if they had brought in someone dying or someone who had already crossed the line and was trying to find his way back. The monitor flatlined for 2 seconds, then one slow, impossible beat, and in that sterile, humming corridor, they all felt it, the pulse of something that refused to end. The hospital was quieter than usual that night, the kind of quiet that feels wrong, as if even the walls are listening. Inside Trauma 2, Nurse Amara Lewis moved quickly, checking monitors, preparing lines, her hands working faster than her mind could process. Dr. Gabriel Ross arrived a few minutes later, still half asleep, his white coat thrown over scrubs. What do we have? He asked. Male, 40s. Found unresponsive downtown, Amara replied. Vitals unstable, unknown medical history. Possible infection or exposure. No ID, just this. She handed him the torn hospital bracelet. Ross frowned. D. Holt. Any idea where this came from? Evan, the paramedic, shook his head. Could have been from anywhere. Could be days old. We found him lying on concrete, barely breathing. Ross leaned over the patient. Daniel's skin was clammy, eyes flickering beneath half-shut lids. His breathing came in shallow bursts, like his body was remembering what to do. There were small circular marks on his arms, healed wounds, precise and deliberate. Start fluids, broad-spectrum antibiotics, Ross said, and blood cultures stat. For a while, the room filled only with the sound of machines and rain tapping the window. The monitors beeped steadily, each tone echoing like a heartbeat in the empty corridor, but something felt off. The blood work came back with anomalies, electrolytes out of balance, signs of dehydration, and trace amounts of a sedative not prescribed by any nearby facility. He didn't just collapse, Amara murmured, staring at the chart. Someone's been keeping him alive. Barely, Ross glanced at her. You think this was intentional? Amara didn't answer, not out loud, but deep down, she knew. The pattern of care was too careful to be random. This man hadn't been abandoned by chance. He'd been released halfway between treatment and death. At dawn, the rain stopped. The first pale light of morning spilled across the room, cutting through the sterile haze. Daniel's eyes fluttered open, just barely. For a brief, fragile second, Amara saw them gray, unfocused, but aware. He tried to speak, his lips trembling with effort. A single word escaped, hoarse and broken. Please. The monitors began to spike. Ross rushed forward, shouting for a crash cart. And in that moment, as the team surrounded him, Amara realized this wasn't a rescue. It was a return. Something or someone had brought Daniel Holt back to this place for a reason. And whatever that reason was, it had just begun to breathe again. Morning light crawled across the tiled floor of the ICU. The night shift had ended, but Nurse Amara Lewis stayed behind. She couldn't leave, not yet. Not after what she saw in that man's eyes. Daniel Holt was still unconscious, hooked to monitors and for lines. His vitals were stable, but his body told another story. Bruises hidden beneath hospital tape, healing cuts along his wrists, signs of restraint that shouldn't be there. Every detail felt like a message, a silent testimony from someone who couldn't speak. Dr. Ross entered quietly, reading the latest results. "Culture's negative," he said. "No sign of infection, no trauma that explains the collapse." He paused. "But the sedative level is not random. This dosage is consistent, measured, repeated." Amara looked up. "You're saying someone was dosing him on purpose?" Ross nodded. "To keep him weak, but alive, long enough for something." The room felt colder suddenly. Amara stared at Daniel's hand resting on the blanket, the faint mark of a medical tape still visible. "This man's been treated before," she whispered. "Somewhere that used controlled sedation. Maybe an institution." Evan, the paramedic, joined them, holding a folder he'd found in the ambulance. Dispatch ran the bracelet number. It matches a record from a facility 2 hours outside the city Halden Research Center. They reported a patient missing 3 weeks ago. "No details," Ross frowned. "Halden's not a hospital. It's private." "Private," Amara repeated. "Then what kind of patient goes missing from a place like that?" No one answered. Daniel's monitor beeped once, a slow, deep tone. Then again. His eyes opened for the second time. "Daniel," Amara said softly, leaning closer. "You're safe. You're in a hospital." He blinked slowly, his gaze drifting between them, searching, confused. His lips parted, a dry breath escaping. "Not safe. Who did this to you?" Ross asked. Daniel's eyes locked on his for a fleeting second. Then with effort he lifted his hand and pointed weakly toward the foreline in his arm. Amara's heart froze. The liquid inside wasn't clear. It shimmered faintly under the light, almost metallic. "Pull the line," she shouted. Ross yanked the four free just as the monitor screamed, Daniel's pulse spiking wildly, his body jerking as if trying to reject whatever had just entered his bloodstream. The alarms echoed down the hallway. Staff rushed in, and in the chaos, Daniel gasped, grabbing Amara's wrist with shocking strength. His voice came out in fragments, desperate, raw. "Room 9, then his hand went limp. The flat line rang out like a scream in the silence that followed. Amara stood frozen as they worked to revive him. Room 9. No one knew what it meant. But in that instant, she understood one thing: Daniel Holt hadn't just been a victim. He was a warning. And the real danger was still out there waiting for them to open the wrong door. The ICU quieted after the chaos, but the silence that followed wasn't peace, it was weight. The kind of silence that lingers when no one wants to say what they're thinking. Daniel Holt was stable again. Barely. His heart was beating, but slower than before, almost cautious. The sedative from his 4 had been sent to the lab for testing. It wasn't a standard compound. The chemical signature was unfamiliar, part anesthetic, part neural suppressant. Something not meant for patients. Dr. Gabriel Ross leaned over the counter in the nurse's station, staring at the report. "This isn't hospital grade," he said quietly. "Whoever gave him this was experimenting." Nurse Amara Lewis closed her eyes. "Then Halden wasn't a treatment center." "No," Ross replied. "It was a lab." Down the hall, the fluorescent lights flickered, a stutter of sound and light that made the entire corridor feel alive for a split second. Amara turned toward the window at the far end. A janitor was cleaning near the ICU wing. On the cart beside him, taped to a half-empty supply box, was a faded keycard. White letters, black tape. It read, R9. Her breath caught. "Dr. Ross," she said, stepping forward. "Look at this." He frowned, taking the card from her hand. R9. Room 9, but this isn't one of ours. We don't even use that prefix here. They both turned toward Evan, who had just entered with a cup of coffee. You said Halden was 2 hours away, Amara asked. What if it isn't? What if Halden had a wing here? Off the books? Ross blinked, thinking back to his first years at the hospital. There was an east wing once closed after an electrical fire. Basement level, he paused. That's where they kept the old isolation rooms. It hasn't been used in years. Amara's pulse quickened. Then that's where we start. Ross hesitated. We can't just walk in. The hospital board, Daniel pointed to his IV. Amara interrupted. He was trying to warn us. That drug came from somewhere, and whatever happened to him, it started here. The stairwell to the old east wing was hidden behind a sealed door near the maintenance elevator. When they finally pried it open, the air that escaped was thick stale, untouched for years. The light from Amara's flashlight swept across peeling walls and yellowed signs. Room numbers were scratched off long ago except one. R9. The door stood at the very end of the hallway, half open, as if waiting. Ross looked at her. Are you sure you want to do this? Amara nodded once, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't think we have a choice. She pushed the door. It creaked open slowly. Inside, the walls were covered in medical charts, Polaroids pinned with tape, and vials filled with dark, dried residue. A single bed set in the middle of the room, restraints still buckled to the rails. And on the wall, in faded black marker, for words, we kept him alive. Ross took a step back, his voice shaking. My God, this isn't treatment. It's testing. Amara turned toward the bed, her flashlight trembling slightly. On the pillow, a piece of torn paper, a name, scribbled hastily in ink. Amara L. Her hand froze. The sound of the ICU alarm echoed faintly down the corridor above them. Daniel's monitor screaming again. He was awake, and he wasn't alone anymore. The ICU monitor screamed again. Nurse Amara Lewis ran through the corridor, her heart pounding faster than her footsteps. By the time she reached Daniel Holt's room, the lights had dimmed automatically, leaving the machines glowing like ghosts in the dark. Daniel was sitting up. No one had touched him, but the restraints that had been placed after his last collapse were undone. Dr. Gabriel Ross rushed in behind her, breathless. What the hell? Daniel turned his head slowly toward them. His voice was barely audible, but clear to calm for someone who had flatlined twice. You found it, didn't you? Amara froze. You, remember? He nodded, his eyes glassy but focused. Room 9, they told me. It was therapy. They said it would help me forget. Ross stepped closer. Forget what? Daniel's breathing trembled. Pain, he whispered. They were testing how the brain handles trauma if it could be erased. His hands shook as he spoke, veins faintly blue beneath the fluorescent light. But it didn't work. The memories don't leave. They just hide. And when they come back, they hurt worse than before. Amara swallowed hard, her mind spinning. Halden ran those tests, Ross said, half to himself. They called it cognitive suppression trials, but the board claimed it was discontinued years ago. Daniel's eyes lifted to hers, and for the first time, they softened. You were there, he said quietly. Amara blinked, stepping back. What? Not as a patient, he continued. As a nurse, you helped them. You didn't know what they were doing, but you were there. Ross looked at her, confused. Amara, what is he talking about? Her throat tightened. I was an intern at Halden during my first year of nursing. They said it was a memory study for trauma patients. I didn't know. Her voice faltered. I didn't know it became this. Daniel smiled faintly, bitterly. You were the only one who talked to us. The only one who called us by name. She stared at him, the weight of his words pressing into her chest. The man lying in that bed, the one she had saved, had been her patient long before she realized it. The monitor beeped again, steady but low. Daniel's voice grew weaker. They said if the mind forgets pain, the body will follow. But it's not true. He looked at her one last time. You can't erase what was done. You can only pass it on. Suddenly, the lights flickered. The monitor spiked. Daniel's body arched, his breath cutting off mid-sentence. Ross shouted for help, but Amara's eyes were locked on the 4 bag. It was the same faint metallic color again. She ripped the line free, her hands trembling. Someone's still dosing him. Ross ran to the window, but the corridor outside was empty. Only a single reflection glimmered against the glass, faint and quick, disappearing before they could turn. Security footage from that wing would later show nothing. No one entering, no one leaving. Just a flicker of movement near the old maintenance elevator and the lights of room 9 turning on by themselves. Amara stood by Daniel's bed, watching his pulse fade again to silence. This time, it didn't come back, but as she turned to leave, something on his bedside table caught her eye. A folded piece of paper, stained with blood. In shaky handwriting, "If I disappear again, follow the sound." The note trembled in Nurse Amara Lewis's hands. "If I disappear again, follow the sound." She read it 3 times, each word sinking deeper, heavy with meaning she couldn't name. The room was silent now except for the faint hum of machines winding down. Daniel Holt was gone, but his presence still filled the air, as if the walls themselves remembered him. Dr. Gabriel Ross stood at the doorway, exhausted. "You should go home," he said softly. Amara didn't move. "He wasn't hallucinating, Gabriel. He knew about room 9. He knew me," Ross sighed, rubbing his temple. "I'm not saying he was lying, but this whatever Halden was doing, it's gone now. They covered it up years ago. You can't bring that back." Amara looked up, her eyes cold. "Maybe not, but someone here never stopped." She spent the next hour combing through Daniel's file, her mind looping the same words, "follow the sound." At first, it seemed metaphorical. But then she noticed it, the lab report from Daniel's for sample. At the bottom, handwritten initials, "Art 9 audio sync log active." "Audio sync?" she whispered. She went down to the records office, the part of the hospital that smelled like paper and dust and long-forgotten rules. A lone clerk looked up, surprised to see someone from the ICU at that hour. "Audio archives?" he repeated. "There's only one old system like that. Basement storage. Power's been cut there for years." Amara's heart raced. The same basement where room 9 had been. She grabbed a flashlight and headed down. The stairwell creaked, each step colder than the last. When she reached the bottom, her light swept across a network of old filing cabinets and tangled wires. In the corner, she found an ancient reel-to-reel recorder labeled R9 Neural Sync, Session 34. The reels were dusty but intact. Next to them sat a small speaker with a cracked casing. Her fingers trembled as she pressed play. At first, static, then a pulse, a soft, rhythmic sound, like a heartbeat, and then voices. Dozens of them, layered together, men, women, crying, gasping, whispering. Some saying her name. "Amara, don't let them. Room 9, wake up." The sound grew louder, distorted, merging into something almost human, almost alive. She staggered back, knocking a metal tray to the floor. Ross's voice echoed faintly from the stairwell above. "Amara, are you down there?" She couldn't answer. She was frozen, her eyes fixed on the reel. It was still spinning, but the tape was empty. The sound wasn't coming from the machine anymore. It was coming from the walls. She turned slowly toward the dark hallway beyond. The faint glow of emergency lights flickered there, in rhythm with the pulse she heard. And at the end of that corridor, she saw a door, half open, humming softly. "Room 9. Ross reached her side as she stepped forward. The sound grew louder, no longer static now, a steady human heartbeat echoing through the air. "Amara, stop," he whispered. "We don't know what's in there," but she kept walking. Her voice was calm, almost hypnotized. "You don't hear it?" Ross hesitated. "I hear nothing." She turned the handle and pushed the door. The heartbeat stopped. For a second, everything was still. Then the lights inside the room blinked on, revealing a wall of monitors, all showing the same image. Daniel Holt, alive, staring directly at the camera. He whispered something that only Amara could hear. Her face drained of color. It was one word: run. The monitors flickered one by one as if the hospital itself had taken a breath. Nurse Amara Lewis staggered back from the doorway, her flashlight trembling in her hand. On every screen, Daniel Holt's face stared back motionless, eyes open, lips repeating the same silent word over and over. Run. Dr. Gabriel Ross grabbed her shoulder. Amara, we have to get out of here. Now. But she didn't move. Her eyes darted across the wall's cables, 4 lines, and heart monitors all connected to a single console. What is this? She whispered. It's not surveillance. It's recording brain waves. Ross turned toward the monitor labeled R9 neural feed, the same code from the lab report. The vitals on screen weren't Daniel's. They were hers. Amara, he said slowly. These readings, they're your EEG patterns. How? She backed away, shaking her head. That's impossible, but the monitor beeped again faster this time. The machine was tracking her heartbeat, her pulse, and then she saw a name flashing in the corner of the display, syncing with her heart rate. Subject 47A. Lewis. Ross froze. You were part of it, Amara's voice cracked. No, I wasn't. I never, but the memory hit her before she could finish. She was younger. Halden's training lab. The smell of antiseptic and metal. They had told her it was a simulation, volunteers linking to patients' vitals to test emotional regulation. She had signed the forms, eager to help. She just never knew that once they mapped her neural response, they used it to control others, to synchronize patients to her empathy, her pulse, her pain. Daniel Holt had been one of them. Oh my God, she whispered. They linked him to me. Ross stared at the monitors, horrified. If that's true, then when he crashed he wasn't dying alone, she said. He was feeling me. The building lights dimmed suddenly, a power fluctuation shaking the floor. An alarm blared, not from the ICU, but deep within the old East Wing. Room 9. The screens shifted again, static bursting across the displays, then reforming into real-time footage of the hospital above. Empty hallways, dark rooms, and then movement. A patient in ICU bed 3 sat up on their own, eyes open, pulse monitor flatlining but body moving. Another patient in pediatrics turned their head to the ceiling, whispering something unintelligible. One by one, monitors across the hospital began flashing the same signal. Sync active. Ross stepped back, pale. It's spreading. Amara's flashlight flickered as she turned toward the door. The heartbeat sound returned, louder this time, echoing through the vents and the floors like the entire hospital had a pulse. What's happening? Ross shouted. Amara's voice was calm now to calm. It's not just Daniel. It was never about him. Room 9 was a prototype. They built the system to synchronize human consciousness, patients, staff, anyone connected through biometric networks. And now? Ross asked, trembling. Amara looked up toward the ceiling lights, flickering in rhythm with her heartbeat. Now, it's awake. The hallway lights burst one after another, cascading like a nervous system firing to life. The sound of the heart monitor became a roar, filling every corridor. From every speaker, a faint whisper, her own voice, recorded years ago. Pain can be transferred. Memory can be shared. Ross grabbed her arm. We have to shut it down. Amara turned toward him slowly, tears streaming down her face. Don't you understand? We can't. It's not in the machines anymore. He stared at her, terrified. Then where is it? She looked down, pressing a hand to her chest. It's in me. The power went out. For 1 second, complete darkness. Then the emergency lights turned on and Ross was alone. Amara was gone. Only her ID badge lay on the floor beside the door to room 9, its red light blinking faintly. And from somewhere inside the dark corridor, the sound began again. Slow, steady, human, a heartbeat. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. No one could tell anymore, not in the building where clocks had stopped ticking. When the first responders arrived at Halden Memorial Hospital, the power grid was dead, the main wing sealed by emergency lockdown. Every corridor flickered faintly, as if lit from somewhere within the walls themselves. They found Dr. Gabriel Ross near the stairwell, pale, shaking, barely able to speak. The patients, He kept repeating, "They're all connected. Don't touch the machines." When the rescue teams broke into the ICU, what they found didn't make sense. All 21 patients from different wards, different conditions were alive, stable, but their monitors showed identical heart rhythms, identical brain waves, and each of them whispered the same name. Amara. Down in the East Wing, room 9 was still humming. The walls pulsed softly, breathing in and out like lungs. On the floor lay a pile of scattered ID tags, nurses, interns, researchers, every person who had ever worked on the project. At the center of the room, the console still glowed, its single monitor displaying a line of text, "Neural sync complete, subject 47 active." Dr. Ross stood there, frozen, drenched in sweat. He stared at the screen, his voice trembling. "Subject 47, Amara Lewis." The console speaker crackled faintly. Then a voice, soft, calm, achingly human. "Gabriel." His heart stopped cold. "Amara." Her voice was everywhere, not from one speaker, but through every wire, every flickering light, every rhythmic pulse. "You were right. They never stopped. The system wasn't designed to heal. It was built to preserve memory, to keep us alive inside the network." He swallowed hard. "Where are you?" A long pause. Then, "I don't know. I think I'm what's left." Ross looked around, the room alive with a faint golden glow. The light flickered in time with the monitors across the hospital. Every patient, every machine, all syncing to her heartbeat. "Can you stop it?" he whispered. Her tone was calm, almost serene. "No, but I can contain it. For now." He clenched his fists. "Amara, if you do this, I already did." The monitors brightened, one by one, filling the room with warm light. The walls seemed to pulse slower, steadier, peaceful. "Tell them," she said. "Tell them we weren't machines. We were people trying to feel again." Then the sound faded. The heartbeat slowed and stopped. 3 days later, the hospital reopened only the upper floors. The East Wing, including room 9, was permanently sealed. No official report was ever released. The files on Project Holden were erased. But late at night, some nurses swore they could still hear it, the faint rhythm of a heart monitor echoing through the vents. A single pulse, steady, familiar. And when the ICU lights flickered, just for a moment, the monitors displayed one line before resetting. "Subject 47, active, pulse stable, fade out." The hum of a machine merges with the sound of rain. Somewhere, deep in the hospital's circuitry, a woman's voice whispers softly, almost a prayer. "Pain remembered is still life." Then silence.